You can combine two services into one in a way that's innovative and meets a market need that few others are doing. I'm Carl White, principal at Market Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of Practice Care. The mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. Not only is that what they really want, but I really believe that care is better when it's just you and your provider and nobody else is secretly whispering in the provider's ear what their own agenda is. Not a hospital or health system, not owners in faraway lands or whoever else they may be. It's just you and your provider figuring out what's best for you. And today my guest is Dr. Judy Butler. Judy is a certified pastoral psychotherapist in private practice who consults with, counsels, coaches, and trains baby boomers and senior adults to become the guardian of their own personal legacy and the legacy of their family. In 2018, Butler Counseling and Consulting received the 2018 Best of Mebane Award in Religious Counseling. Dr. Butler holds a doctorate in psychotherapy from the Graduate Theological Foundation, a Master of Divinity degree from Campbell University, and is a member of both Epsilon Pi Eta and Phi Kappa Phi honor societies. Judy is a member of the American Association of Pastoral Counselors, Triad Retirement Living Association, a certified spiritual director, ordained clergy, speaker, and teacher with many years of experience and many thousands of hours of practical application. Judy, you have one of the most interesting backgrounds I've ever come across, and I really thank you for taking time to come on Practice Care.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. You really make me sound good.
I just read what you sent, so it sounds really, really good and hugely interesting. And let's just jump right in. First question, I think maybe a basic one for you, but an important one for our listeners. What is pastoral psychotherapy?
Well, pastoral psychotherapy combines the religious and spiritual side of our psychology with the scientific portion of psychotherapy analytics, and actually works to help a person in a holistic way.
Okay. And how long have you been doing it? And yeah, how long have you been doing it?
Um, well, that's kind of a strange question to answer because I've done it sort of in incremental stages.
Okay.
And what I mean by that is my first career was actually in the hospital laboratory. I'm a scientist by nature.
Okay.
And so very analytical, and very to the point. And then at some point later in life, I went back to school, to divinity school, and became a spiritual person, which is actually the other part of our brain.
Right.
I've always been spiritual, but that sort of was something that spoke to me in a different way. And I never intended to become a pastor, but as luck would have it, or God would have it, depending on how your point of view is, um, I did become an ordained pastor. Now, what I discovered was that I didn't see how the church was actually meeting what I felt like were some of the psychological needs that a lot of people have when they come to church. People come to a congregation in search of answers for their brokenness, for their problems, for their issues in life. And the church does its best to address it. But when you tell someone simply, well, just pray about it or have more faith, I felt like there needed to be more support. So I kept on pursuing, and I came up with the psychotherapy. And hence, this is how I ended up where I am.
Interesting. And we've had a few other guests on in previous episodes, and they have holistic practices, and they not like yours. Yours is the first of a kind, at least for those of us here on Practice Care. But what they did is they had a particular type of training. For them, it was Western medicine, so it was either surgery or orthopedics or whatever it was. And then they were like you. They're like, that solves some of the problems, but it doesn't really get to the heart of things. And in their case, Western medicine has advantages of limitations, so they have combined it with different parts of the holistic world, and together they've got Western and Eastern, or however you want to say it. They've got what they view as a holistic and a pretty convincing case that they look at a patient more completely, I guess, than anybody who does either one of those alone. So you're kind of doing the same thing.
Yes, and as a matter of fact, I grew up in the South, and I grew up very traditional, what most people in this country think of as traditional Southern belle.
Okay.
And so spirituality in church was part of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And it was just something we always did. But as a lot of people have discovered, when you get to be a teenager or going into college, you begin to have questions about your belief system.
Mm-hmm.
And so I, was normal in that regard as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always pushed the norm and challenged belief systems, whether they be spiritual, whether they be medical, whether they be financial or legal. I'm like, well, why do we have to do it that way? Let's see why. What is that about?
Mm-hmm.
As a scientist, somebody who spent the first part of my life working in hospitals, I truly believed I would be so comfortable. And then spiritually, I was challenged because I became a chaplain through my training and was a chaplain for many years in the hospital. And as a result, I was confronted with dealing with people in their death and dying, their sickness, their health, the reasons that people are in hospitals from a spiritual standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned at that point to work with people of every sort of faith system you can imagine. I've worked with Muslims, with Buddhists, with Hindus, with traditional Southern Christians, with Catholics, Greek Orthodox, every system I was confronted with. And so that really challenged my spiritual beliefs, undergirded by this medical feeling of being in the hospital, dealing with science and medicine and health and wellness in that way.
Mm-hmm. And so is it that you're looking at these patients and scientifically, I see what's happening to you, but it doesn't seem to comfort you completely. And then I guess theologically, I'm talking about these other things, but that doesn't seem to work by itself either. You must have eventually connected those dots and said, if I put these two together, I could
Yes.
really, and that happened while you were still in the hospital setting?
Well, it actually happened as a part of a process. I don't know
Okay.
that there was one specific aha moment. It was
Mm-hmm.
like incremental little aha moments along the way.
Right.
And so, I mean, for an example, as a chaplain, I walked into this room and this man's there, and he thought he was having a heart attack. He was a relatively young man. And so, but scientifically, looking at his test results, looking at everything that had been done, there wasn't anything wrong with him. And so then a lot of people say, well, it's just all in your brain. Well, it wasn't necessarily just in his brain. Yes, that was part of it. But what I discovered in sitting with him spiritually was that his heart was actually broken because of the loss of a loved one. He actually was hurting physically. His body was in pain because the loss that he was suffering was so great, he almost could not bear it.
And that seemed like a heart attack to him.
It seemed like a heart attack. And that's why he was
Wow.
admitted to the hospital. And so here I sit with a man who physically is in pain. He feels the physical pain, but it's the longing of his spirit to reconnect and to not lose that love and that person that has died in his life.
Got it. Okay. Now, you in your bio, you said you focus on baby boomers and senior adults. Why those categories as opposed to any
Well,
other or more than those?
one of the things I've learned in business, and I know that's part of your thing that you want to focus on, but I want to highlight at this moment,
Yeah.
it's that it's important for people to find what they love, do what they love, but be very specific about what it is and why it is that they love that thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was when I was going through divinity school, and people would say, "Oh, you're going to be a pastor," and I'm like, "No, no, no, not me. I can't be a pastor." But eventually, I was. And when I became a pastor, I was an associate pastor, specifically working with senior adults. So, working with senior adults is interesting, and I'm going to say this because I am one. But senior adults
You're
are
allowed.
like big teenagers that you can't tell them what to do, and they have enough money and enough determination. They're going to do what they want to anyway. So working with senior adults is very, very interesting from that perspective. But I also realized that there is an unmet need with a lot of senior adults and their adult children. They
Mhm.
don't have very important conversations in any depth about what's coming next, what's coming down the road, and how to navigate those waters. So again, back to psychotherapy, has allowed me then to actually understand family systems and family dynamics in a psychological way to be able to work with the senior adults that I dearly love, all with all
Mhm.
my heart, and enjoy actually seeing them and their adult children or their other family members heal in a healthy way so that they can move forward and not have a crisis in their life.
Right. Now, how do you go about finding these clients? Because on the one hand, you're highly specialized. I imagine I'll go out on a limb, at most a handful in your area of pastoral psychotherapists. Maybe you're the only one. But how do so you would think, well, it's clear to figure out what you do and what's different about you because you would be one of a
Mm.
few. Nevertheless, yeah, how do you go about finding clients?
Well, like any person starting out a practice or a business, you're going to do some sort of marketing.
Hmm.
I'm not very good with marketing, but you do have to hang your shingle, so to speak, so that people know that it's there.
Yeah.
So, the typical ways of creating a website and doing all those things. But more importantly for me, it's about touching those places that are already familiar. As a pastor, I knew the other pastors in the area. So the pastors knew when I became a psychotherapist that was what I was doing. And
Hmm.
they then know, oh, well, okay, now we have a resource. But then, word spreads very quickly when you are in such a specialized niche that people then start calling and referring. But, psychology today, you know, I would highly recommend any person out there the return on the investment. If you're in practice, you need to be in psychology today.
Hmm.
You need to have your name on Google.
Hmm.
Ask God, Google God, and God, Google God will answer.
Yes, the Googles. Yes.
And so that's a thing too. But once you decide yourself, once you make your decision, what it is you're going to do
Mhm.
and where you're going to quote unquote specialize, um, once you put that energy out into the world, into the universe, I believe the universe says back, okay, got it. I know what to send you now.
Mhm.
Because if we send out mixed messages about what it is we truly want, I think spirit, God, Holy Spirit, universe, whatever, however you want to couch it,
Yeah.
is like, what? What do you want? And so when you're very specific, this is what I do, this is what I'm good at, and these are the people that I would like to help. I
Yeah.
think there's a response in kind.
Yeah. And one of the biggest, I think, reasons why it's working so well, if I just put my general kind of strategic marketing hat on, is that you've got a very clear and understandable story as to why you are combining pastoral with psychotherapy. And it's because both sides are necessary for many people in order to get the complete kind of healing that they say they want. And you've watched it,
Right.
you've lived it. You didn't just wake up one day and say, I think I'm going to put these two together and see what happens. It was born over time of really good stories and really good experience. It just makes sense. It makes sense when you say it, and then the person listening go, yeah, you know what, she's right, that does make sense. And they can probably decide for themselves, that fits me or that doesn't fit me, once they get exposed to why you do what you do.
Exactly. And the thing I tell people all the time is we have to live. The only way we can live is out of our experience, out of the
Mhm.
things that we've been through, or the places we've been, as Dr. Seuss would say. Um, And so for me, what I do, I've been a caregiver I was caregiver for my dad. I'm now a caregiver for my mother. I help my husband with his parents, and he has a 103-year-old grandmother that we also care for.
Wow.
So all of these things and the experiences I've had going through divinity school and working with senior adults, all of those things have combined to bring me to where I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I encourage whoever's listening, what kinds of experiences have you had? What did you learn from them? First of all, I always ask that question. What did you learn from this? Good, bad, or indifferent?
Mm-hmm.
And, how does that inform your thinking or your belief system? Where does that take you in your mind? And then what does your heart say? If you don't love it, don't do it. You're not going to be that good at it. You may be okay, but if you don't love it, don't do it. Do something else.
Yeah.
But if you're passionate, if you love it and you're good at it and you've got the experience, then go for it, whatever the niche is.
Yeah. And you'll be much more convincing when you try to convince others. If you truly believe that what the service that you've created is going to work and it's going to be helpful and it's better than something else that's out there, whatever else is out there.
Yeah,
Do you think
absolutely.
you have competition?
Yes and no. That's that both and kind of
Yeah.
thing that we talk about a lot. There are people that do pieces and parts of what I do,
Mm-hmm.
but there's no service out there at the moment that does exactly what I do.
Mm-hmm.
I work people through from the very beginning of their life. Where were you born? That's the
Mm-hmm.
first question I ask. Where did you grow up? Where did you go to school?
Mm-hmm.
There's a process that I put in place, and I walk them all the way through and invite their adult children, their caregivers into the conversation. And then we talk about actually what's coming down the road,
Mm-hmm.
what's going to happen, how that works, what that looks like. And I even help people write their own obituaries. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a thing. People don't want to have those discussions, and they don't want to talk about money. They think, well, my kids want my money. Well, I said, well, yeah, they do. I mean, let's be honest, they
Yeah.
do,
Yeah.
but they want it so they can look
But
after
only when you're done with it, and whatever's left.
it.
There's no rush.
I want to take care of you the best way possible, and we need to use your money to do that. That's what you saved it for.
Right.
And so, they don't like to talk about money. They don't
Mm-hmm.
they think people should be private. Well, they should be private to a certain degree. But when you're asking this person, your adult child or your loved one, to look after you and care for you and help you, okay. But you need to be more open and honest about what your circumstances are.
Right.
So it's just, it's that. I even tell when I talk to younger therapists who are getting into the business, let me just say, if you're out there and you're listening and you have any passion for children, there is a huge need,
Mm-hmm.
for child therapists.
Mm-hmm.
So if that's something you think you can handle, please, by all means. But back to my senior adults.
Yes.
But yes, I do, I just enjoy so much doing this. I enjoy seeing the process and combining the spiritual with the psychotherapy, with the science. It's just a complete package, I think.
Yeah. I mean, the reason I asked about competition is that on the one hand, like I said before, maybe a handful, maybe. But on the other hand, there are plenty of people who are looking at your services. It's competition to a degree is what they might think of as competition, even if they're right or wrong. And so they might look at other psychotherapists as competitors. They might look at other pastors as competitors and not connect the dots of, well, Judy puts them both together, or that puts her a cut above for my needs because she puts them both together. I mean, have you run into, I guess, confusion amongst your clients about, what aren't you just a psychotherapist? Aren't you just a pastor? Because that's sort of a nod to what makes you different.
Well, you're right. There is a process of actually having to explain what it is that I do.
Mm-hmm.
But surprisingly, I guess the biggest competitor that I run into with what I do are estate attorneys.
Really?
It's not even in the psychotherapy realm. Yes, because people come to me and they're talking about their problems and their issues, and they're like, well, I'll just go get an attorney and get some legal documents and everything will be fine. And that's a misconception.
What kind of problems are they talking to you about that they think an attorney, an estate planning attorney, is a equivalent choice?
Well, like I said, when we talk about money,
Oh
you
yeah,
know,
yeah,
when we talk about what are you going to leave as your legacy? Because that's my whole thing, is that what is your legacy going to look like? What is your story?
yeah.
What is your legacy going to look like? And they're like, well, I'll just get an attorney and have some legal, I'll get a will and that'll be my legacy. Or I'll, set up a trust and that'll be my legacy. And they don't realize that there is this genealogical, theological, psychological way that they can pass on who they are. And they're passing it on whether they realize it or not. But it also helps them to be comfortable with the end stages of the rest of their life. And I don't mean the dying and death part. I mean, where I am. I could die this afternoon, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah.
But as far as I know, I still got some time left, and I'm still leaving and creating my legacy and what I want that to be like. And how can I be as healthy as possible psychologically and spiritually, that I can leave that for my children and my grandchildren.
Right. Yeah. Okay. I get it now. So they think financial legacy when they hear the word legacy. They don't think about
Yes.
the other components of like a comprehensive legacy, I guess, for lack of a better way of saying it.
Right.
It's interesting. That's funny. Yeah. Well, you should go talk to an attorney to get your financial legacy in order, but that's not, there's more to it. Very interesting.
Right.
Judy, you have about the coolest background I've ever heard of. It's so interesting. I'm,
Thank you.
yeah, it's a really, really interesting discussion. And I'm sure we could go in a lot, even more directions and deeper, but in the interest of Practice Care's mission for bite-sized advice, I do want to kind of bring us to the finish line with a couple of wrap-up questions I ask every guest. The first one is, now that you've heard our conversation, yourself and me, and the questions that I've asked, is there anything you think I should have asked you that's relevant, but just didn't think to ask you?
No, I think you covered it pretty much. As far as something that you could have asked me that maybe your listeners would want to know, I was born on Halloween. That's kind of interesting.
That's pretty cool. Coming up. So do you get, is it fun to share your birthday with Halloween, or is it, oh man, nobody's paying attention to my birthday because it's Halloween?
Well, as a kid, no, it was not fun.
Right.
Everybody wanted to go trick-or-treating. Nobody wanted to go to a birthday party. But as an adult, it is awesome. It is so fun. And to get to step into a different role, which is part of psychotherapy sometimes.
Yeah.
When people come in, they're living out of a role. So, sometimes it's fun to step into an alternate reality, so to speak.
Right.
For an evening. Yeah.
So you get cake and candy. I mean, who else can say that?
That's right.
Yes. And then my other wrap-up question is, if we just take a step back from the conversation and we think about, combining two services and having a niche being different, for folks who are listening to this, who are picked, whose interest is picked by what we're talking about, are there maybe one or two pieces of tangible advice that you could offer them that they could start doing as soon as they're done listening to start to go down this kind of specialization path themselves?
Again, I think I said earlier, and I would like to emphasize, think about where you've been in your life. Even if you're, just starting out, you still have experiences that you've lived out of, both positive and negative. Mm-hmm. And just ask yourself, of those experiences, which ones are really life-changing, monumental types of experiences that inform what you think and believe. And then actually find out what it is you love. What is it that really trips your trigger, gets you up in the morning, and you get up all energized? If you get up and you hate it, and you get up and you think, I got to have a cup of coffee or I'm not going to make it through the day, you might want to do something else. Mm-hmm. But if you get up and you're excited to go and see what your day brings, if you're excited to help your client through whatever, niche it down, go all the way down. The more niche you are, you can combine whatever experience it is, whether it be, let's just say you're a competitive cheerleader and you want to help with people who are psychologically dealing with being in front of others or, being on stage, then think about that. You can combine most anything with psychology and help someone else.
Yeah. And what you said at the end there, especially, is, take a skill that you've got and imagine it in a new application. And,
Yes.
there's somebody without any stage fright helping others get better about stage fright and a good presence. I'll add another piece of advice is, even whether it's the context of something you love or something that, it's part of you offer service X in your practice. If even a few patients ask you what sounds like the same question, and the answer is, well, we've got this other service Y that would apply, you probably have the beginnings of, if I just proactively combine these two offers into one, if these three asked about it on their own, I'll bet you others have the same. There's more screening you have to do than that, but that's the beginning where you might be able to put something together that few others are offering and make a real difference, even better difference for patients' lives.
Absolutely. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, perfect. Well, Judy, thank you once again for coming on Practice Care. Hugely interesting discussion, a discussion and a topic unlike any we've had on Practice Care before. So really, really appreciate it. Once again, Dr. Judy Butler is with Butler Counseling and Consulting. And Judy, we're going to put your contact information in the show notes for your episode in case anybody else wants to get a hold of you. And just a couple of other points before we wrap up. If you have an experience with the business side of your practice, like Judy does, or you're someone like me that works with practice owners and you think others would benefit from hearing about what you have to say, well, then we want you to come on Practice Care and share it with everybody. In the show notes for this episode and all episodes, there's instructions, there's a link. Just fill it out. Tell us what's on your mind so that we can get you scheduled as soon as possible. And then finally, if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Practice Care on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks very much. And until next time.